You've been manipulated, not once, not twice, but over and over again. And the worst part is you didn't even see it. You thought you were making your own decisions. You thought you were kind, loyal, loving. But someone else was pulling the strings while you were calling it love, duty, or just being a good person. And here's the brutal truth. The best manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your own choice. It's in the favor you didn't want to say yes to, the apology you gave even though you were right, the silence you kept just to avoid being too much. You've been trained not with violence, not with threats, but with smiles, sighs, and carefully planted guilt. And if you think this doesn't apply to you, then congratulations. You're exactly the kind of person they count on. In this video, we're not here to blame you. We're here to wake you up. Because if you don't know how manipulation works, you will be used by those who do. But if you stay, and if you're willing to face what you've ignored for years, you'll never be controlled the same way again. Let's begin. Have you ever felt like something was off but couldn't quite explain what? Like a decision you made didn't really feel like yours, like your words, your choices. Your life had been slightly nudged. Maybe it was saying yes when every part of you screamed no. Maybe it was trusting someone who later revealed a side of them you never expected. Maybe it was staying silent, just to keep the peace. You thought it was kindness. Maturity being the bigger person. But what if it wasn't? What if behind every moment like that there was something else, something invisible, yet incredibly precise and influence? A pull, a set of strings attached to your thoughts, your fears, your wounds. And no, this isn't science fiction, it's not hypnosis, it's not some cinematic mind control. It's more ordinary and more dangerous. It's manipulation, not the loud, obvious kind, not threats or screaming or dramatic ultimatums. The real kind, the quiet kind, the everyday kind, the kind that hides behind politeness, behind gratitude, behind affection. You see, the most dangerous manipulator is the one who never looks like one. They wear the mask of empathy, of care, of closeness. They don't take control with force. They take it with permission, your permission. And they do it so well you don't even notice it's happening. That's why this is so important. Because once you start noticing, once you really start to see, you can never unsee. That moment when you realize, wait, I didn't actually want that. That wasn't my need, that was theirs. That's the beginning. It's subtle at first, just a feeling in your gut, a pause, a question, but if you follow that thread, it leads somewhere terrifying and liberating. You begin to notice patterns, a look someone gives you, a phrase they always use. The way you feel guilty just for saying no. You start to see the strings and, more importantly, who's holding them. And here's the thing, you've been conditioned to not look, to doubt yourself, to tell yourself I'm overreacting. They mean well, it's just me. But it's not just you, it never was. You're not weak, you're not paranoid, you're waking up. And that's where power begins. Because once you understand what's really happening, you can begin to change the game, not by confronting others first, but by seeing yourself clearly, by asking, where did I learn to ignore my intuition? Why do I feel guilty for setting boundaries? When did I start believing that love means surrender? These aren't easy questions. They're the kind of questions that strip away illusions and leave only truth. But truth is the only way out, because you can't free yourself from what you can't name. So let's name it. Let's name the invisible strings, the emotional debts, the soft commands whispered in the tone of a loved one's voice. Let's bring them to light so they lose their power. This is not about paranoia. This is about clarity, not about becoming cold, but about becoming aware. Because once you see the strings, you can cut them, one by one, and start living not as a puppet, but as a strategist. And that changes everything. They don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to argue. They don't even need to ask. They simply know you better than you know yourself. That's how it starts, not with manipulation, but with observation. Because the real manipulator doesn't force. They study. They watch the way your voice changes when you're nervous. They remember the stories you tell about childhood. They see how your eyes drop when someone frowns at you. They take notes silently, patiently. And when the time comes, they act, not with pressure, but with precision. Tyler is one of those people. At work, he's everyone's favorite, always smiling, always ready to help. But there's something about him, something too smooth. You ask him for a favor and he delivers immediately. But then, a week later, he needs something, and you feel like you can't say no. Because didn't he help you last week? Didn't he say, "I've got your back"? You don't remember agreeing to anything. But somehow you owe him now. That's not friendship. That's emotional debt. And Tyler is an expert at creating it. Then there's Sarah. She never asks for much, at least not directly. She just looks tired. She sighs a lot. She says things like, "No one ever really checks on me." And even though she never says it out loud, you find yourself texting her, offering help, apologizing for not being more present. That's not love. That's guilt being weaponized. These people don't shout. They don't need to. They use silence. They use timing. They use your empathy as a leash. Because they know something most people don't. They know how much you need to be good, how much you fear being the bad guy, how uncomfortable it is for you to disappoint someone, so they never push you. They just wait until your own conscience does their job for them. They smile and let you walk into the trap yourself. This is not about evil masterminds or villains from movies. It's about everyday people who have learned how to get what they want by tuning into what you're afraid to lose: approval, connection, reputation, peace. And here's the most chilling part. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. They just think they're being clever. But cleverness without empathy is manipulation. And you call it being nice, being loyal, being understanding. But deep down you know something. Off. You feel drained after spending time with them. You feel guilty without knowing why. You replay conversations in your head and wonder, did I say something wrong? You didn't. You just didn't realize you were in the presence of someone playing chess while you were playing checkers. Now here's the truth. The more sensitive you are, the more empathetic, the more you care, the more likely you are to be targeted. Because they don't manipulate despite your kindness. They manipulate because of it. But this ends now. Because the first defense is awareness. And now you've seen it in Tyler, in Sarah, maybe even in yourself. The question is, if manipulation starts before the first word is even spoken, then where does defense begin? And what happens when you begin to break their rhythm, when you stop responding the way they expect? That changes everything. Let's go there. It starts so small you almost don't notice it. A compliment, a kind gesture, a favor you didn't ask for. And then a sense of obligation. You tell yourself you're just being decent. You're just returning kindness. But somewhere along the line you realize the scoreboard has changed. You're giving more than you wanted to. You're bending in ways that don't feel natural. You're staying quiet to avoid tension. And you're doing it again and again. That's not generosity. That's emotional debt. And the truth is, you never signed up for the contract. But it was written anyway. Manipulators don't use ink. They use gestures. They give when you're weak so they can collect when you're strong. It's a setup. But it doesn't feel like one. It feels like love, like friendship, like loyalty. That's the trick. The best chains never look like chains. They look like comfort. They look like tradition. They look like things you'd never question. And before you know it, you're stuck. Because who wants to question kindness? Who wants to seem ungrateful? Who wants to break the silent agreement? So you stay. You stay in that friendship that drains you. You stay in that relationship that controls you. You stay in that family dynamic that guilt trips you into submission. Because you're a good person. And that's exactly what they're counting on here. What no one tells you. Manipulators build contracts, emotional contracts. They make you feel seen. Then use that connection as collateral. They tell you, I only trust you. So you feel honored and trapped. They say, you're the only one who understands me. And now it's your job to never leave. It's not a request, it's a bind. And they never say it outright. They don't need to. Your own empathy does the heavy lifting. You don't want to disappoint them. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want to be the one who walks away, so you stay, you give. You apologize, you adjust. And all the while you're sinking, you become a version of yourself you don't recognize, softer, smaller, less clear, because clarity would be a threat to them. Boundaries would ruin the game. But the game only works if you keep playing. So here's a moment of truth. If you feel tired around someone, if you feel anxious before seeing them, if you feel guilty after talking to them, something is off. You're not crazy, you're not cold, you're not too sensitive. You're paying off an emotional debt you never agreed to. And the interest, your energy, your voice, your peace. It's time to pause, to ask, where did this agreement begin? What do I believe I owe them? And who taught me that love means sacrifice? Because it doesn't. Love that must be paid back is not love, it's leverage. And the moment you see it, the spell breaks. But that's just the surface. Because behind every manipulated moment there's a pattern, a map. And if you can trace it back, you'll find the blueprint. But what kind of mind creates these blueprints, and why does manipulation feel so natural to some? To answer that, we have to go back in time, back to a man who understood human nature before the world gave it a name. Let's meet him next. He saw it before anyone else did, before psychology had a name. Before emotional manipulation was something you could Google, he already understood the game. Niccolo Machiavelli, a man who wrote about power not as a fantasy, but as it really worked. He didn't care about morality. He didn't care about ideals. He cared about results. And while most people wanted to be loved, Machiavelli wanted to be honest. He wrote, men judge more by the eye than by the hand, because everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. That one sentence is a masterclass in manipulation, because it means this: if you control what people see, you control what they believe, not through lies, but through image. The manipulator doesn't need to be powerful. They only need to appear necessary. They don't need to have control. They only need you to feel safer when they're around. That illusion is enough. And Machiavelli knew that most people would rather be comforted than confronted. That most would choose a beautiful lie over a brutal truth. So he wrote a book called The Prince, not as a guide for the masses, but as a manual for rulers. He taught them how to think, how to calculate, how to use fear, respect, timing not as emotions but as tools. He understood that human beings are not rational, they are emotional. And whoever masters emotion wins, not by being the loudest in the room, but by being the most precise. This wasn't about brute force. It was about surgical influence. And that's exactly what manipulators do. They don't argue, they don't overpower, they shape. They shape the story you tell yourself. They shape the way others see you. They shape the boundaries of what you believe is fair, kind, normal. They craft the narrative and let you walk into it willingly, like a stage set for a play where you think you're the writer, but you're just reading lines. This isn't always sinister. Sometimes it's unconscious. Sometimes it's cultural. Sometimes it's generational. But the outcome is the same. You follow a script you didn't write, in a story that drains you. And because it feels familiar, you think it's real. That's what Machiavelli understood. Reality is not objective, it's curated by the loudest voice, by the strongest image, by the clearest strategy. He didn't write to make people good, he wrote to make them aware. And that's what this part of your journey is about. Not to make you colder, but to make you clearer, not to teach you how to manipulate, but how to see manipulation, so that you are no longer a character in someone else's play, so you can finally rewrite your own. But here's the twist. Machiavelli's work wasn't just about others manipulating you. He knew that to be manipulated, you must have an opening, a vulnerability, something inside of you that gives them access. And that's what we'll uncover next. Because if you want to stop the puppeteer, you have to know what strings they're pulling, and more importantly, why you let them. You're not manipulated because you're weak. You're manipulated because you're human, because inside every person, there's a quiet place, a soft place, a hidden wound. And if you don't know it's there, someone else will find it before you do. They won't call it out. They won't attack it. They'll use it. That's the terrifying part. The manipulator doesn't break in. You open the door without knowing it. And once they're inside, you call it connection. Let's talk about the most common openings. The 3 emotional blind spots that make you vulnerable every single time. The first is the hunger for approval. This begins young. You learn, subtly, repeatedly, that being loved is conditional, that being accepted comes at a cost. Smile more. Don't speak too loud. Be polite. Be agreeable. You're rewarded for being easy, punished for being yourself, so you adapt, you become what they want, you shape-shift, you perform, and soon you no longer ask, "What do I want?" You ask, "What will make them love me?" That's the beginning of the fracture, and into that crack a manipulator steps in. They don't offer you freedom, they offer you validation. They see your need to be seen, and they reflect it back to you. They say the right things, they praise you just enough, they make you feel noticed. And because you're starving, you take the bait, even if it costs you your boundaries, even if it costs you your identity. The second vulnerability is guilt, specifically guilt for existing on your own terms. Somewhere along the line you were taught that putting yourself first is selfish, that saying no is rude, that boundaries are rejection. So you don't want to hurt anyone, you don't want to seem cold, you say yes. Even when it feels wrong, you apologize, even when you're not at fault. And manipulators love this, because they don't need to push. They just need to sigh, to look disappointed, to say, "I thought you were different." And suddenly you fold, not because you were forced, but because your guilt dragged you there. The third opening is fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten. This fear doesn't shout, it whispers, it tells you, if you leave, no one will come. If you speak up, they'll walk away. If you stop giving, you'll be left behind. So you cling, you tolerate disrespect, you minimize your needs, you stay quiet in chaos because the silence of being alone seems worse. But here's the truth. If someone's presence depends on your silence, it was never connection, it was control. And these 3 wounds, approval, guilt, fear, they are not random. They are inherited, learned, reinforced by culture, family, school. They are not your fault, but they are now your responsibility. Because what you don't heal will be handed power to people who smile at you while they slowly erase you. This is the inner architecture of manipulation. It doesn't start outside, it starts within. And to build immunity, you must first see clearly, ask yourself, where am I starving for approval? Where do I feel guilty for simply existing? What am I most afraid to lose? Because the answers to those questions are the coordinates of your strings. And the moment you see the strings, you begin to cut them one by one by one. But cutting is not enough. You must replace weakness with strength, confusion with clarity, reaction with strategy. That's what we'll do next. You've seen the wounds, now let's build the armor. It's not enough to see the strings. You have to learn how to walk without them. Because clarity without action is still captivity. So how do you stop being a puppet? You become a strategist. You build emotional armor, not walls that shut everyone out, but filters that keep you from being played. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. Let's start with the first weapon, awareness. And I don't mean casual awareness. I mean surgical, moment-to-moment self-observation. You need to know your triggers better than they do, because that's what manipulators feed on: the automatic reaction. You feel guilt, you fold. You hear praise, you soften. You sense tension, you fix it. That's the script. They know it, they rely on it. But when you start noticing, what am I feeling? Why do I want to say yes right now? Is this urgency mine, or is it being injected? You break the rhythm. You create space between the stimulus and the response. And in that space, power is born. The second tool is detachment, not the kind that numbs you, but the kind that frees you. Strategic detachment means this: you don't take every emotion as truth. You don't take every request as a demand. You don't let someone else's tone become your reality. You observe without diving in. They compliment you, pause. They guilt you, breathe. They threaten to leave, let them. You are not obligated to react. Reaction is the playground of the manipulator. They set the rules, they light the fuse, they watch you explode. But when you don't react, when you stay still, when you simply see, the game loses power. The third move is unpredictability. Because manipulation feeds on pattern, they know what to expect. And they plan around it. You always say yes. They pressure harder. You always explain yourself. They twist your words. You always avoid conflict. They create one just to control the outcome. So break the pattern. Say no calmly, firmly. Walk away without explaining. Stay silent when they expect you to fight. Let discomfort sit in the air, let them wonder. Because when you become unpredictable, they can't strategize against you. They show their hand. And that's when you win. The fourth layer is identity. Most people don't manipulate your choices. They manipulate your self-image. They plant seeds like, "You're not like other people." "He's so giving, I love that about you." "No one else gets me like you do." These are not compliments, they're cages. Because once you believe them, you'll do anything to protect that identity. You'll become the caretaker, the savior, the always available one. And slowly you vanish. So ask yourself, who am I when I'm not performing? What do I believe about myself? That others are using as leverage. Because the more stable your self-definition, the harder it is to be shaken. And that is the heart of immunity, not absence of emotion, but mastery of it. You don't owe anyone your energy, your peace, your integrity. You owe yourself one thing: to stay whole, to stay sane in a world full of emotional games, is a radical act of rebellion. So next time someone pulls at your guilt, pause. When they flatter you to soften you, pause. When they demand an answer right now, pause. That pause is your sword, your shield, your power. And this is just the beginning. Because while it's hard to deal with manipulation from strangers, what happens when the one pulling the strings is someone you love, someone who sleeps beside you? That's where we're going next. And it won't be easy, but it will set you free. It's one thing to spot manipulation from a stranger, from a boss, from a casual friend. But what if it's coming from someone closer, someone you love, someone who raised you, someone who sleeps beside you? That's when the rules change. Because the heart doesn't follow logic. And love blurs everything. You start making excuses. You don't understand them like I do. They've been through a lot. That's just how they show love. But inside, you feel the tightening, you feel the loss of self, you feel the hesitation to speak, the fear of being misunderstood, and slowly you disappear. This is not a rare story, this is the most common kind. Because emotional manipulation in close relationships is quiet, it's decorated with tradition, wrapped in loyalty, disguised as care. James learned this the hard way. He loved his mother deeply. She raised him alone, sacrificed everything. That's what she always said. But every time he tried to live differently, to make a choice she didn't like, the guilt would suffocate him. She wouldn't yell, she would sigh, look away, say, "I guess I'm just not important anymore." And James, he canceled the trip. He changed his job plans, he stayed close for her. Not because he wanted to, but because not doing it felt like betrayal. That's not love, that's emotional imprisonment. But try telling that to someone inside it. L defended. Because when the manipulator is someone you love, the guilt doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your fault. You blame yourself for feeling trapped. You call it selfishness. You say, maybe I'm the problem. But you're not. You're just afraid. Afraid of losing connection. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of becoming the villain in someone else's story. So you choose silence, you walk on eggshells, you adjust your tone, you rehearse your words, you shrink. And then you start forgetting who you are. Because in relationships like this, the price of peace is your identity. But here's the hardest truth. Not every relationship that feels warm is healthy. Not every bond that holds you is keeping you safe. Some are keeping you stuck. And love doesn't justify control. Love doesn't make you feel small. Love doesn't use guilt as glue. Love doesn't punish boundaries. So what do? You set the line, not with rage, not with revenge, but with clarity. A calm, firm boundary. No, I won't do that. No, I won't explain again. No, I don't owe you that. Not to hurt them, but to rescue yourself. Then you speak, you name what you see, not to change them, but to affirm yourself. And when the backlash comes, because it will, you hold the line. They'll call you ungrateful. They'll play the victim. They'll go silent. They'll test you. And you breathe, you remind yourself that stepping away is not cruelty, it's clarity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from a pattern that's been killing you slowly. Because staying in emotional captivity doesn't save anyone. It just repeats the wound. So let this be your moment to step out, to unhook, to face the pain of separation instead of the slow death of self-abandonment. And when you do, you'll begin to see the world differently. You'll read the unspoken, hear what's not said, feel what's true beneath the surface. That's when you stop reacting and start seeing. But to truly hold your ground, you'll need one more thing. The skill of strategic detachment. Let's build that next. Strategic detachment isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming aware without becoming absorbed. Because when you can see, but not sink, you become dangerous in the best way. Let's begin here. Not every emotion you feel needs a reaction. Not every story someone tells deserves a response. Not every problem presented to you is yours to solve. Detachment means you can witness without drowning. It means when someone throws bait, you don't bite. It means when chaos rises, you stay centered. Because here's the truth, manipulators thrive on urgency. They push your buttons to provoke an immediate answer, a rushed decision, an emotional response. They can't work with stillness. They need movement, reaction, noise. But when you give them silence, you interrupt their rhythm. And that interruption, that's your power. Imagine walking into a room and someone says, "Why didn't you call me back? I guess I don't matter." The old you might have panicked, apologized, over-explained. The detached you breathes and says calmly, "I needed space." No explanation, no guilt, just clarity, because when you're clear on your own boundaries, you no longer collapse under the weight of someone else's need. That's strategic, it's not cold, it's conscious. And it's something you practice, it starts small. Next time someone flatters you, pause, ask, what are they really seeking? Next time someone guilt trips you, pause, ask, what story are they trying to make me carry? Next time someone pressures you, pause, ask, why does this feel urgent and is it even mine? That pause creates space. And in that space you choose. That's what detachment offers, choice. Because without it, you're just reacting, you're being pushed, pulled, played. But with it, you observe. And in observation, you gain clarity. You begin to see the patterns. How certain people always frame things as your responsibility. How some situations always end with you feeling small. How familiar emotional setups pull familiar responses. That's when the curtain lifts. You stop being a character. You become the director. You see the scene and decide whether to enter it. You hear the line and choose not to recite yours. You sense the tension and no longer jump in to fix it. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care wisely. It means you know the difference between compassion and self-erasure, between empathy and enabling, between peace and people-pleasing. And here's the surprising part. The more detached you become, the more present you are. Because you're no longer lost in stories, you're grounded in truth. You no longer absorb every emotion, you witness them. And that witness consciousness is what protects your energy and preserves your clarity. It's not easy at first. You'll feel tempted to react, to explain, to defend. But each time you build strength, and soon that strength becomes natural. You become the calm in the storm, the mirror that reflects without absorbing. And manipulators, they can't work with mirrors, they need sponges. They need people who absorb everything and ask nothing. But that's no longer you. You're learning to see, to pause, to choose, and that choice is liberation. But there's more. Because once you've stopped reacting, you can start creating a new rhythm, a new posture, a new game. And in that game, silence isn't weakness, it's dominance. Let's talk about that next. Silence unsettles people, especially those who are used to controlling the conversation. They expect a reaction, a defense, an explanation. But when you give them silence, you take control without saying a word. Because silence isn't the absence of power, it's the redirection of it. Most people fear it, they rush to fill it. They think silence means disconnection. But the strategic person, they understand silence as a tool, a blade, a shield. A test here is why it works. Manipulators script your behavior, they count on your patterns. If they flatter you, you'll soften. If they guilt you, you'll give in. If they threaten you, you'll apologize. But when you do nothing, just breathe, just look. The script falls apart. They can't predict you anymore. They start questioning themselves. They scramble. They show their hand, because ambiguity creates pressure, and pressure reveals truth. The power of controlled silence isn't just about not speaking. It's about being calculated in when you do. You speak when it serves clarity. You speak when it serves you, not to defend, not to convince, not to fill the void, but to direct. This is mastery. It's what Machiavelli hinted at when he said, "It is not essential that a prince should have all the good qualities, but it is essential that he should appear to have them." In other words, control perception, guide attention, maintain ambiguity, because power isn't in being good, it's in being perceived as in control. So how do you do this? You begin by showing less. You don't overshare, you don't over-explain, you don't let people read your every emotion. You let them wonder, let them ask. What are they thinking? What do they know? What will they do? You don't play your cards, you become the table they're played on. You walk into rooms and say less and people lean in more. You pause before responding, and they start rethinking the question. This isn't manipulation, this is mastery of presence. And presence is influence, because the more you can hold ambiguity, the less you can be controlled. Most people give too much, too fast, too freely. They think transparency equals connection. But full transparency can be vulnerability without protection. So you learn the art of selective visibility. You choose what to reveal, when, to whom, and why. You're not hiding, you're leading. Because the person who controls perception controls reality, not just in how others see them, but in how they experience themselves. You become less reactive, more composed, more in command, and this shakes the manipulator's foundation. Because they rely on seeing you flinch, they rely on you unraveling. But now you're not the storm, you're the eye of it, still focused, untouched. And this stillness is what creates pressure for them. They can't reach you, not because you're gone, but because you're untouchable. You've become the kind of presence that doesn't bend easily, that doesn't apologize unnecessarily, that doesn't explain what it doesn't owe. And in that power, you draw a new line in the sand, one they can't cross, one they can't even find. Because you're not just harder to read, you're harder to play, and now, you don't just survive manipulation. You outclass it, but there's one final step, the ultimate cut, the final detachment when you stop playing their game altogether and start living by your own rules. That's what comes next. And it changes everything. This is the final cut, the last invisible thread between you and the version of yourself that was still being played. Because everything you've seen until now, the tactics, the triggers, the patterns, none of it matters unless you do one thing: take full control of your mind. Because here's the truth most people will never say out loud: as long as you don't take control, someone else will. And it won't look like control, it'll look like love, like tradition. Like what people do. You won't even notice it because it's wrapped in the stories you were told as a child. Be nice. Keep the peace. Don't make things harder. Sacrifice is strength. And so you did, you became the peacekeeper, the fixer, the good one. And slowly, without knowing it, you were trained to obey, to yield, to adjust, to live in a cage. And call it kindness. But now you've seen too much. You've seen how approval is weaponized, how guilt is designed, how fear is planted. And now you know the enemy isn't just outside, it's internal. It's in every unexamined thought, every belief you inherited without consent, every rule you follow just to avoid discomfort. That's the real manipulation. Not just what others do to you, but what you do to yourself when you stop questioning. So today we cut that too. We cut the need to be liked, the need to be understood, the need to explain your worth. You don't need it anymore. What you need is to stand on your own clarity, your own authority, your own definition of peace. That's not arrogance. That's sovereignty. It doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop leaking. It means you don't pour into people who poke holes in your container. It means you speak when it matters, not when it's expected. It means you choose your path even if it makes others uncomfortable, because your comfort has been sacrificed long enough. Now it's your time to build a life that's not built on performance, but on presence, not on approval, but on alignment. And when you do, you become immune, not because no one tries to manipulate you, but because you no longer give them access. They don't know how to read you, because your validation doesn't come from them anymore. Your guilt has been processed. Your fear has been named, your clarity has arrived. And now you walk differently, not rushed, not reactive, but deliberate. You take up space, you say no without explaining, you let people be uncomfortable, you let silence speak. And most importantly, you stop calling emotional chaos connection. You stop mistaking obligation for loyalty. You stop editing yourself to keep the peace because the price was always too high. This is the life after awakening. It's sharper, cleaner, sometimes lonelier, but always more honest. And with honesty comes something priceless: freedom. Not the kind you post about, the kind you feel when you wake up and know you are no longer a pawn. You've become the player, you've become the game changer, so here's your final choice. You can close this and go back to your old script, or you can breathe and start living by a new one, written by you, for you. Without apology, welcome back to yourself. It's good to finally meet you.